Support for the Couples Council comes from Mercier Wellness and Consulting. Their purpose is to equip you with the right skills for a happy and healthy relationship. Services available in office or virtual. Schedule your consultation now. For more information, visit mercierwellness.com. Mercier Wellness and Consulting. Small steps, big changes.
This podcast is not a substitute for therapy. Please consult a licensed professional for your mental health needs.
Now on with the show.
Hello and welcome to the Couples Council. I'm your host, Dr. Jameson Mercier. And sitting beside me, I almost said sitting on my lap.
I don't mind that.
Is the one and only Herdyne Mercier, the wife mentor.
I'm back.
Yeah, welcome back.
Thank you very much.
But she's back as the new Herdyne Mercier, licensed clinical social worker.
Say it again.
I'm going to say it for those in the back. Herdyne Mercier, licensed clinical social worker.
Say it again. I should see his face. I worked hard for it, baby.
Yes, you did.
Oh my God. I have been missing in action because your girl has been working on her and representing the Wifidence brand and everything that it stands for as far as you as a wife and loving on yourself, going after your dreams, dreaming big, without feeling any guilt. And so I have taken the last 3 months to study and the final leg of the race and take my exam, and with hard work and the support of my husband, my family, and my friends, Dr. J was tearing it up in the kitchen, cooking, supporting me, making sure the kids were good so that I can study, that now I get to say Herdyne Mercier, licensed clinical social worker.
What?
Yeah, baby.
So that just means we're twice as dangerous. That just means we're twice as powerful. And so you're not just getting two people talking on the mic. You're getting some quality stuff, guys. We don't take this lightly. Yeah, we don't take it lightly. When we're talking about relationships and we're talking about mental health. And we're not knocking people who just, want to talk about it, but we go above and beyond just talking about it. This is not only a passion, not only purpose, but this is something that we've dedicated life, time, resources to. Having said that, the next few weeks, we're going to be focusing on mental health.
Yep.
Okay, we're going to talk about mental health, specifically and particularly within the context of relationships and marriages.
Yeah, but not only that, for those of you who do not know, we want to be the first to tell you, Dr. J and myself, that May is Mental Health Awareness Month.
Yes, it is. So you're going to see a lot of calendars about self-care and being good to your mind and little things you can do here and there. We may even talk about some of the things that we do to stay mentally fit and mentally healthy. But we also want to let you know that mental health is important to your marriage as well. Okay. And so our topics this month will be specifically geared towards mental health and mental health in your marriage. Okay. So, what else? Okay.
We do want to say why we were missing in action. The other day we had that episode that we forgot to release because we never recorded and life happened to us.
Well, we don't want to tell them that.
Yes, we do. We got to be honest with the people. I think 2 weeks ago we were late with our recording and we had to throw a rewind. And the reason that happened is because after becoming licensed, so many other things have come out of that, and we're developing programs for you all, and we're meeting people. We're hiring people. We're hiring our team to make sure that when we come to you ready to rock and roll, and make sure you receive quality.
Yeah. So this 2-person team here is expanding exponentially.
Mm-hmm.
Some of them have been asked that we not let you know who they are.
Mm-hmm.
Eventually you'll hear about them. I mean, you see their work all the time, be it social media, be it when you go onto the website. Trust me, there's a small army of people making all of this happen.
Mm-hmm.
And so as we build and grow, there's bumps along the way. And so, we had to give you guys a replay. But we've got some great feedback about that.
Yep, and there was valuable information.
Yeah.
See, when you set up value, a replay is always good, right on time.
Yes, it's so nice we had to do it twice.
Yes.
So thank you guys for being gracious.
Yeah.
Okay. Are we ready?
We're ready.
Okay. So we're talking about today, right? I heard someone say one time, I'm depressed, but my spouse thinks I'm lying. I'm not going to tell you who said whom, but it could easily have been a wife who says, I'm depressed, but my husband thinks I'm lying.
Mm-hmm.
Or it could be a husband who says, I'm depressed, but my wife thinks I'm lying.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. And the conversation, was eye-opening, not just for the client, but for me as well.
Mm-hmm.
And for many people, as you're hearing this, maybe you are in a similar situation. And so we'd like we always ask, apply this to your situation, but with a grain of salt.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Everyone's situation is unique. But we're talking about what's it like, right? When you find that you are depressed, or when you know or believe you are depressed, but your spouse thinks that you are lying or not being honest. Well, that can create some serious issues, and we're going to talk about some of those issues. But first, we want to get a definition of depression.
Mm-hmm.
We need to understand what it is exactly that we're talking about. And we're not going to get very technical with you today, but we're going to give you a definition for the foundation of our conversation with you all today.
We're also going to share some pertinent information on what the signs are. And so you may, after listening to this recording, that, oh my God, I didn't realize my spouse may be depressed. And so at the end, we'll tell you what you need to do as far as supporting your spouse and getting him or her the right assistance through counseling or depending on the severity of the case.
For the sake of our conversation today, right, depression is a mental health disorder. So we're talking about persistently depressed mood or loss of interest in activities, causing significant impairment in daily life, right? So that is the clincher right there, causing significant impairment in daily life. So essentially, you've lost interest. You are not just sad, but you are so sad that you no longer can function. Right? Anytime someone is talking about diagnosing depression, and there are different categories of depression, but we're talking depression in general. We're talking that it's gotten to the point where it's affecting your functioning. It's impacting or preventing you from functioning, if not greatly reduced or decreased your functioning.
For example, like one of the telltale signs is the things that your spouse or yourself used to love to do. You would prefer not to, you avoid, you would possibly stay in a dark room, isolate yourself, or in some cases with depression, you'll often find you're doing the opposite of what you used to do. For example, if you were an eater, you love like a foodie, and now your spouse or yourself finds yourself, I don't really have an appetite. Like you're not engaged into activities. Those are just a few telltale signs of what could be happening. Your sleep patterns may be off. Whether, remember I said it could be the opposite of what you typically, your normal self is. Your sleep pattern may be off. Your cognitive thinking may be off. You may describe it like, I feel like a cloud or a fog. I'm just, that yucky. It's like a yucky, icky feeling.
Yeah. And in extreme cases, depression can be associated with thoughts of suicide.
Yes.
Okay. For a lot of couples, this is more or less when it's clear to them that there's something wrong with their husband or wife. Okay. On some of the on the less severe and the opposite side of the spectrum, if you lost a family member, if you lost a pet, if you lost a job or can't find a job, it's quite normal to feel sad. Okay. We've talked about this in previous episodes. Feeling sad is not the problem. Okay. Like we said in our definition, it's when it's persistent and it affects your functioning. All right. In the context of a marriage specifically, you may find that your spouse is no longer interested in sex or intimacy. It's common that a couple may call out to a therapist or seek a therapist for couples counseling for issues related to sex and intimacy. And in that session or in those sessions, that's when they realize, wait, it's not that the spouse, the husband or the wife is not interested in sex or intimacy. It's that he or she is battling depression, and a lack of intimacy is a symptom of that depression. Okay, so that's what it might look like. And granted, depression looks different for everyone.
And some of the behavioral changes that happens with depression, you will feel very irritable. Things bother you very easily. You can. You social isolation. You'll probably also experience some social isolation, which I stated earlier. And so those are some telltale signs that something is just not right.
Yeah. It's also possible that your spouse may get angry. Okay. Men often exhibit anger and are often misdiagnosed, right? Because typically anger is an okay emotion for men, and that's a whole different conversation. But what might look like crying and being very emotional in women will look like just being just reckless behavior in men. Okay? They're different things. So what might it feel like? So you think you're depressed, or you know you're depressed. You've even went to see a doctor and they're talking about perhaps you might want to seek treatment, and your spouse, your husband or wife is like, no, that's BS. I don't think you're depressed. I think you're faking. I don't think you're depressed. I think you're just lazy. I don't think you're depressed. I just think you don't feel like going to work. How can anyone possibly lay in the bed all day and not be able to go to work? You know we got bills and we got to feed these kids. What do you mean you're depressed? Stop being weak.
And one of the things that's very, like, you don't do that. You can't just snap out of depression. It's a process that you have to go through, that you need to work through. And so one of the key points or key areas in helping someone that may be experiencing depression is providing support. But the major thing is connecting them to a therapist or, an individual that they can help them process, but most importantly, a therapist.
Yeah, it's definitely treatable. And if treated appropriately for their own level of depression, it resolves within months. Okay. But while you're feeling depressed and while your spouse is telling you, no, you're not, now we're fighting about it, and this thing now is wearing on the marriage. Now, when you have a spouse who tells you they might be depressed, instead of saying, honey, listen, let's talk about it. Now you're like, no, I don't want to talk about that. And believe it or not, that's one thing that someone battling with depression does not need, is to be pushed further away. One thing someone who's trying to cope with the depression does not need is to be made to feel guilty. Okay? And it isn't that one spouse may intentionally try to make the other spouse feel guilty. He or she might, but this not being aware, this not knowing, maybe not understanding, can cause these feelings to arise in the spouse who's battling depression. So then, what is one to do? What does this spouse, this husband or this wife, what do they do?
Mm-hmm.
So for this spouse who's battling depression, but their husband or their wife does not believe them, what do they do? Well, first thing they should do, and that's a word I rarely use, is
I know.
they should still and most definitely get treated.
Mm-hmm.
Right? Because, people like to take mental illness and put it in a different category from, say, any kind of physical illness.
Mm-hmm.
If you were out in the yard and you fell out the tree and you came in and said to your husband or wife, babe, I think my arm is broken.
Mm-hmm.
You wouldn't wait for them to agree with you before you went to the emergency room.
No.
If you said you sprained your ankle or you broke a tooth, you wouldn't need them to agree with you before you go to the emergency room or to the dentist.
Mm-hmm.
Your mental health, guys, is no different. You do not need your spouse to agree with you before you seek treatment.
Okay. And one of the things I often encounter, people don't even know that treatment is available. How to get treatment. Where do they find a therapist? There's so many directories. If you have insurance and you're wanting to use insurance for that, you can call and there's counselors that take insurance in your plan. If you're a busybody and you want to speak to someone.
If you're busy and you're traveling a lot, there are people, there's telehealth.
Yes.
Your insurance may even provide telehealth. There's people online who will coach and guide you. Now, again, you have to be careful who you pick and choose to treat you. But the point we're making here is there's lots of options. And if you're even not having a job is not an excuse for not getting treatment, mm-hmm. because there's lots and lots of agencies available. Mm-hmm. Okay. So the point we're making here is do not wait for your spouse to agree with you that you feel like something is wrong. Mm-hmm. Take the initial steps and seek the treatment that you feel you deserve. Mm-hmm. Okay. You are the one who's struggling with this. And guess what? If you're wrong, if you do not have depression, let a professional tell you that. Mm-hmm. Okay. And so if you're in one of these relationships where your spouse is a mental health professional, listen, don't let them treat you. Mm-mm. And we say that as lovingly and as carefully as we can. And we're not talking about getting a prescription for penicillin or pain meds or something here. We're talking about something that's going to affect the relationship. Mm-hmm. And if you are that spouse who's the mental health professional, believe me, you do not want to be your husband or wife's therapist.
No, sorry. You want somebody else that does not have a vested interest, because what's going to happen, you're going to be like respite fatigue. Or
you're going to burn out.
You're going to burn out. So it's very important that you all both or the individual seek counseling.
Yeah, well, so here's what's going to happen, right? So finally you go by yourself, and then, maybe they tell you, hey, we can treat you together. Maybe they advise couples counseling, or you go for couples counseling and they find out, well, you know what, Bob? I hear what you tell me, but this sounds like more of an individual issue. Okay. It is okay, even though one spouse is getting treatment, that both show up. A lot of times I have one couple take their husband or their wife to counseling and drop them off. Mm-hmm. There's nothing wrong with you sitting in on it. Granted, assuming time allows, mm-hmm. okay? But you go and you find out what's wrong. Maybe you sit in, maybe you don't, but that shows support. As for the spouse who thinks the other may be lying, the husband who thinks the wife is lying, don't assume that he's just a jerk. Don't assume that she is just selfish. as much as we know today about mental health and mental illness, there are many people who are ignorant about mental health and mental illness. They just simply do not know.
And it's oftentimes your spouse is not probably going to come to you because of the jokey jokes that are said in the house, like the you crazy, what's going on, or the judgment that comes.
Yeah, they're afraid of that.
Yes, so the judgment that comes, even watching TV, some of your comments to the television will probably keep them from saying anything, saying I need help or asking for help. So we have to be very careful how we word things, how we say things. It's crucial that when we do things, it's done in love. I'm a big believer of that.
Yeah.
Before I bite back, I find, okay, we may have to step away from the situation. And then I'm like, what is the best way to respond with love?
You know, it's a difficult thing, but approaching it with love, like Herdyne is saying, really is the best way to begin to have this conversation. You know, if you're unable to talk about it, whether that's with your spouse or a professional, eventually what we start doing is we start medicating by ourselves. So this is where you might see one spouse is drinking. They may be abusing medications, prescribed or unprescribed. They may even develop reckless behaviors. Okay. So we want to be open. But back to this original point, not everyone who thinks you're lying or doesn't believe you, it's not only because they're being mean. It may just be that they don't know. And in circumstances where one spouse knows a little bit more than the other, it requires a lot of patience. You know, we often talk about couples being unequally yoked. Not that they're not meant for each other, they're just on they're at different places.
Different spectrum.
One may be further down the road and you got to slow down to let your spouse catch up. Sometimes you might even have to turn around to go get him or her. Okay? So, you know, someone we've been talking about a lot lately, Brene Brown. She talks a lot about making generous assumptions.
Yep.
Okay? If we can remember within the context of our relationships, and particularly one that we put a lot of value in and we make a lot of sacrifices for your marriage, get in the habit of making generous assumptions about each other, and that will go that much further in helping address and ultimately resolve.
And that's another thing in talking about Brene Brown. Your spouse or the relationships needs to be an atmosphere where one can be vulnerable. And that's a whole other topic for another day. It's so hard. And just the idea of telling your spouse, I love you, is hard for some people. Just the idea of hugging on your spouse, it's hard for some people. Just the idea of being supportive, they don't know how to do it. So it's the undoing that probably needs to happen, babe. And then the reprogramming to make sure that you're able to support your spouse the best way. The hardest part is the undoing and then learning to do the right thing again.
Yeah, one thing we always say, you know, people don't just stop behaviors immediately. They do it less and a little bit less the next day, a little bit less the next week. And then ultimately they stop doing it. Then they begin to take on new behaviors, but they don't just do them immediately. They got to learn.
Yep.
And they get a little bit better day by day, week after week.
Yep.
So if you find yourself in a situation where you think you may be depressed, we encourage you to approach this conversation with your spouse, not pointing the finger, okay? Because you want your spouse's support, and if you find that you can't get it, don't be afraid to do it on your own, okay? Now, the thing about mental illness, statistically speaking, from the start of someone decompensating, meaning when they begin to show signs and symptoms of a mental illness, to the point where they actually get treatment, On average, statistically speaking, that's a 10-year gap.
Wow.
There's a 10-year gap on average. Now, that means some people wait much less. Some people wait much longer. That has to stop. We encourage you not to live in that gap, in that gulf between symptoms and treatment. Okay? And so that's why we say it may not be months or years before your spouse comes around. Your spouse may never truly believe that you are battling depression.
Mm-hmm.
They may always doubt the diagnosis. They may always doubt the treatment. Okay, which, by the way, generally speaking, treatment for depression, we're talking medication and some form of talk therapy. Medications alone, okay, won't do it. They're complementary treatments. So, but yes, spouses may doubt and never fully accept that their spouse may be depressed. And you know what? It may not be for what you think it is. Think about what your spouse may be going through, having to consider the fact that their husband or wife has a mental illness.
That's hard. It's a hard thing to process. And sometimes it's so hard that, babe, sometimes people stay in denial.
The denial may be what keeps him or her from breaking apart, falling down.
Mm-hmm.
So we're talking about these very serious things, and there's nothing wrong with getting the support. There's nothing wrong with getting the help we need. And I was teaching a class this past weekend, and one thing, every time we mention what we're going to do next, they're like, oh, wait, what do you mean? Is it hard? I said, listen, it only sounds hard.
Mm-hmm.
It only sounds hard, guys. Getting treatment and help for depression, whether it's individually or as a couple, it sounds hard. But there are people there that can guide you. There are people there that can walk you through the treatment itself and get you out of the funk and get you back on track for the relationship that you want. Okay? Any other thoughts, babe?
You know, I think as I'm processing it and I'm thinking about it, I think the biggest thing is we've identified what depression is. We've told you some signs. Now, I think that the action step would be sit back, look at your spouse or yourselves, and ask yourself the questions. Have I changed, and do I fit in any of these categories?
Yeah.
And if I do, the next action step to take is finding a therapist.
Yeah, finding a professional that will help you. And it's funny, you say, babe, have I changed, right? Mm-hmm. If so, how?
Mm-hmm.
You may have to sit and look at your spouse and say, there's something off about my husband or my wife.
Mm-hmm.
Because when you're in it, you don't see it.
Mm-hmm.
Some people, they think they look the same. They think they're walking the same, but they are hunched over. They're tense. And it takes people outside of their circle, outside of themselves to see it. So, guys, we're talking about depression in marriages and what you do if a spouse doesn't believe it or just simply thinks that you're flat out lying. Okay? Listen, you're not qualified to deal with your spouse and your depression.
Nope.
Okay? So take care of yourselves, guys. Make sure you do that. Like we said at the beginning of this episode, we're going to focus on mental illness and mental health within the concept of marriage because May is Mental Health Awareness Month.
Mm-hmm.
We encourage you, like Herdyne was saying a moment ago, yes, during the month of May to focus on your mental health, but not just in May. Make this a year-round thing.
Mm-hmm.
Okay? We encourage you to look into it and just to see how you can do better. All right? Resources are out there.
If you have any questions, we're out there.
We're a resource. You know how to get in touch with us.
Mm-hmm. On social media platforms, The Wife Mentor or Dr. Jameson Mercier, as well as our home base, mercierwellnessandconsulting.com.
Yep. So reach out to us if you need to. We're here.
I'm super excited to report Sister Chat with Herdyne on social media platforms. The Wife Mentor are going very, very well. We've changed the time from 9 o'clock to 8 o'clock because Dr. J is a Got fan, which is Game of Thrones. And so I really hated interrupting his quiet mental health time, recharging, his videos.
They're not just videos.
Okay, his show. Is it a show?
Listen.
It's a series? What is it?
Get it right.
So Dr. J's Game of Thrones time. So I did change it to 8 o'clock Eastern Standard Time.
And I think it's better in general.
Yeah, it is. I found it to be better.
Everybody.
And
Thank you for listening.
Chastity was with us.
Like them as much as we do,
And we
click
talked
the
about
subscribe.
authenticity.
But now they have to go,
Be you,
because
do
it's
you.
family
That was a
time.
good
So go
chat. So
practice
you can
what
go
you
check
heard,
that
and
out
we'll catch
at
you
the Wife
on the next
Mentor
episode.
page. And this Sunday, we're going to have Shantae Thompson. She is going to be talking, or we're going to be discussing divorced. Now what? And so the things that you say to people, the stuff that people aren't talking about, how hard it is to date after divorce and different things, and looking at it from a different perspective. So please join us on Sunday at the Wife Mentor page. And I think for the most part, that's it.
Yep, guys, listen, that is our show. Thank you guys for sticking with us. Thank you for enjoying the lookbacks, the rewinds. We're sticking some fresh content in here and for the month of May. And continue to share. Please continue to comment. Continue to subscribe. We've met some people here and there, and they're like, "Oh, I caught that episode. Thank you. It kept me from popping off on my wife."
Yeah.
I'm like, "Yeah, don't do that. And definitely don't blame us if you do." But thank you guys. We love what we do, and most of all, we love you and we love your support. Thank you for listening to this episode, and we look forward to having you on the next episode
Of the Couples Council.
Bye now.